Tonight, Trump's 100th day approaches.
President Trump has made scant progress during his first 100 days.
Despite the historic obstruction by Senate Democrats, he's worked with Congress to pass more legislation in his first 100 days than any president since Truman.
We'll review his first few months in office later in the show.
Protests in Venezuela continue.
What Venezuelans have at stake today is their own survival as a democratic nation.
And we'll preview the Virginia governor's race.
All that and more ahead.
This is Talking Points. Our top story tonight. President Trump proposes sharp tax cuts and an overhaul of the tax code. I'm Mike Riccardi.
And I'm Josh Carney. On Wednesday, President Trump proposed a skeletal version of his new tax plan. The reforms include a dramatic reduction in individual and business income tax rates, as well as a reordering of the tax code that would benefit the wealthiest Americans. The plan was offered with an explanation as Trump tries to show progress during the week of his presidency's 100-day mark. Some of the major changes include 3 tax brackets valued at 10%, 25%, and 35%, lowering the top rate by nearly 5 percentage points.
A lower capital gains tax is also a major feature, dropping 3.8% to 20%. The aim being to create incentive for people to invest. A repeal of the inheritance tax, or death tax as it's commonly referred to by Republicans, is also in the mix. But the most aggressive idea in the new plan is the cutting of the corporate tax rate from 35% to 15%, which is projected to reduce revenues by $2 trillion over 10 years. Trump's tax reform plan is gearing up to be another key promise facing major hurdles. This gamble comes ahead of the administration's first report card, as the nation asks, what will the implementation of this plan actually look like? Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin is encouraged by the plan.
This plan is going to lower the debt to GDP. The economic plan under Trump will grow the economy and will create massive amounts of revenues, trillions of dollars in additional revenues.
In this plan so far, while there are details, it's still just sort of an outline. And once we see what the actual bill looks like, I think the devil is in the details, and that will really drive where the support is coming from. Because in the past, we've seen the difficulty over Obamacare and other legislation, so this is certainly not going to be easy.
Right. I think they depleted a lot of their political clout in some of the measures that they haven't met their mark on, and the reason why they're getting this out is to make sure that they are establishing, hey, there is progress ahead. This is what we are recognizing we need to do, and we're going to get there. So that's the push to get this out of
And I think it really comes down to whether or not you believe in supply-side economics, as to whether or not you can actually bring in more revenue after cutting taxes by such great margins.
Absolutely.
We'll have to leave it at there. We'll talk more about that later in the show. When we get back, we'll talk President Trump's first 100 days, which promises has he kept and which fell short. Don't miss it.
Well, Thomas, you've got pre-diabetes. But with more exercise and a change in diet, it can be reversed.
I've tried exercising. It just makes me hungry for bacon.
I love bacon, too. And who really likes to exercise?
Not me.
Me neither.
Nobody. So we're good?
What? Oh, you still have pre-diabetes. Big time.
Here's your check. Oh, you got it. You know, since I got rid of my car, I really enjoy walking.
Okay. God, no.
Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates.
Oh, you're home early.
You live with your mom?
That'll set your game back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Saturday marks President Trump's 100th day in office, and Press Secretary Sean Spicer says it's unbelievable what he has been able to do thus far. But polling suggests his job approval is at an all-time low for any president's first 100 days. Talking Points correspondents Galat Malamed, Elijah Shama, and Dan Prager are here to dissect the president's first 100 days with all its successes and shortcomings. Dan, Elijah, Galat, thanks for being here. Dan, really glad to have you back.
It's great to be back.
I'm glad you're feeling better.
Thank you.
Now, real quick, I just want to ask you, I'm going to ask you to grade President Trump's first 100 days, not based on what you think of his policies, but basically, has he been able to keep his promises, and how productive have these first 100 days been compared to other presidencies? Because you had Sean Spicer saying that this is the most productive 100 days since Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Dan.
I'll give him a C on what he's actually done, but a B on how he's presented it. His supporters still support him strongly. His approval rating has gone down since he was elected, but he has done some things that really have shown his supporters he's on their side. There was a big loss with the whole Obamacare replacement situation. That was definitely his biggest loss to date, which is why I would say he's probably at a C, because he's probably kept as many promises as he's broken. But he's still doing a great job of showing his supporters that he is on their side, and he's still working to get to what he's trying to do.
Real quick, A through F, pick a letter.
I'm going to side with C- about a D, just because his foreign policy, he campaigned on being a non-interventionist president. This is a man that's already launched airstrikes in 2 countries and has an armada right around the Korean Peninsula. We're talking about major bellicose actions towards foreign nations.
And Galat?
That's a good point.
I'm going to give him a C because the major things that he promised, repeal and replace Obamacare, he even said on the first day, still hasn't happened. The wall, travel ban, that went to court. The travel ban got overturned in court, and his things that he's trying to initiate are going to court, and then he's losing those court battles. So C.
Go ahead.
Now arguably since both of you mentioned Obamacare in your explanations, now arguably one of the biggest focal points for the early Trump administration was to fix healthcare, was to find a solution and a medium for which Obamacare could be overhauled. What is next for Trump's plan when it comes to healthcare? Has his political clout been diminished by Obamacare or his healthcare plan being blocked? Dan?
I think his support has been a little diminished. But as far as the will of the people, they're still behind him. A lot of them are actually kind of saying to themselves now, this plan that they were proposing was destroyed by Democrats, and it was an unpopular plan, and blame is going around. And there was enough confusion that actually it really just seems like nothing happened at all. Now, some people who are policy wonks are going to say, this was a big loss for him. He doesn't really have a plan to replace it, and he doesn't really have a plan. But eventually you will see him try again, and he's got to have to do better. If he fails another time, he's done.
And the first plan did not go through because they didn't have the support of the House Freedom Caucus. This time around, they do have the support of the House Freedom Caucus, but there's reports that moderate Republicans are not on board with this. So, that's something looking forward that's going to be very difficult. Democrats say they will not vote to pass a bill on government spending if there's a vote on Obamacare this week. But as we look at how these things are sort of progressing and how, they have a majority in the House, Senate, and the presidency, the Republicans, yet they can't get through these major legislations. Now, if we look at tax reform, obviously we don't have the details yet, but, tax reform has been something that presidents have tried to do in the past. It has never been very easy. I think the easier route is just, simple tax cuts, not to work and other things. Your thoughts?
I think, to quote Paul Ryan, doing big things is hard. When we're looking at kind of these huge overhauls, people don't like getting tax cuts, but then people also like a lot of the government spending that happens. When you look at, people want roads, people want infrastructure, people want their schools to be better, but people want their taxes to be lower. And it's very hard to strike that balance. It's even harder when you're trying to kind of swing for the fences every time you swing.
When you look at the priorities that he's placed, and this can be directed to either of you, on corporate gains, on individual incomes, and dramatically diminishing how much we are collecting, what do you think he'll be able to accomplish with this new tax reform plan, and do you think it's ultimately going to help him overall?
I think right now his base of core supporters, they're still very highly in favor of him. But I think with this new tax plan, I think he's not going to lose the risk of getting the businesses, because their taxes are going to be lowered by a lot, but I think he runs the risk of losing his core base of supporters because by taking it down from 7 tax brackets to only 3, that means the middle class isn't as broken up as much. That means you have people at the lower end of the middle class spectrum and the upper end paying the same taxes, and that's ultimately going to hurt his poor supporters.
I mean, I think this is a dream for Republicans, but you can't really even judge the tax plan because where is this money coming from? If he doesn't have a plan to take this money out of somewhere, moderate Republicans are never going to go for it.
He's talking about rebuilding America. Meanwhile, he can't even collect the funds from these tax
And
cuts.
he wants this $1 trillion infrastructure plan.
Absolutely.
Where is that money coming from? There's not really a set plan of what to do after these plans.
And speaking of money, President Trump really wants to boost military spending. Elijah, you mentioned Syria earlier. Now, with Syria and North Korea, this sort of increasing in military hostility, what do you think moving forward the Trump plan is?
I think the Trump plan is really kind of speak loudly but also carry a big stick. It's kind of that almost Teddy Roosevelt-ish, but really brash, very bellicose. It's almost a try me approach. He's shown that with the Moab, he's shown with the 51 Tomahawks, he's shown that we're going to use these weapons that we've had that we've kind of maybe stayed away from using before. He's showing that, listen, if you hit us, we're going to hit you back with everything we got and then some. So I think it's very much a kind of a defense mechanism in showing how strong the American military is while trying not to use it.
Interesting.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you all for being here. After the break, a district judge from San Francisco blocks an attempt to strip funding from sanctuary cities. Don't go away.
Superheroes? Just 4 brothers who hate bullies and love this city. Gear up, guys.
Got a quarter?
Last week, the U.S. Department of Justice continued in its efforts to put an end to sanctuary cities with a threat to strip grant money from the cities that help illegal immigrants avoid deportation. But the threat lost traction and weight when a district court judge in San Francisco banned the executive order. San Francisco City Attorney Dennis Herrera and General Attorney Jeff Sessions hold 2 very different opinions on the matter. Talking Points contributor Connor White is here with more. Connor, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So, yet again, this plan is hindered, and Trump's administration has suffered a little bit of a loss. So what is the judge's reasoning behind blocking this legislation?
What he's looking at is basically saying that this isn't within the powers of the executive branch. He's arguing that such a move to be able to strip funds and able to basically coerce these cities into doing what the federal branch, what President Trump is looking for them to do, is a congressional matter. It's congressional dollars, and he's citing a 2012 Supreme Court decision that was actually on the other side of the political aisle, where President Obama and his allies were blocked in stripping Medicaid funds from states that, in an effort to try to get them to comply with Obamacare.
And in the past, President Trump was critical of Judge Gonzalo Curiel. He had the so-called judge. What has been his response and the federal lawyer's response to Judge Oreck's reasoning?
Very similar. Trump has called for this to go straight to the Supreme Court. He's called it a ridiculous ruling in several tweets. And as you said, this is the third time that federal courts have struck down immigration-related executive orders. And Jeff Sessions has similar thinking as the president. He thinks that it's a ridiculous ruling, and to his mind, is the opposite of the judge. It's that these powers are squarely within powers of the president.
Now, with Trump's administration pushing back so fiercely, how do you see this battle evolving, and what do you think is next down the road for this issue?
Well, given the precedent that was set in the 2012 decision that I mentioned earlier, it is likely to go in line with sanctuary cities and Judge Oreck's ruling. However, even if that does go through and it's decided that this is a kind of power that would be with Congress, it's a Republican Congress. And if they fall in line with Trump, then these threats can still be pushed through. And there are several sanctuary cities that have actually, or sanctuary jurisdictions, counties, that have actually stepped back from and relinquished that status since Trump's inauguration.
Absolutely. Certainly something this city will be paying attention to, as well as the rest of the country. Connor, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Virginia's governor primaries are approaching, and they feature a clash of ideas on both sides of the aisle. Our former Talking Points anchor Alex Amico is here to break it down. Now, Alex, when I was your executive producer, I always told you that New York was better than Virginia. Tonight, I'm actually taking an interest in your home state. So break down this race for me.
You always told me and you were wrong every time. As political junkies across the nation begin to predict how voters will react to President Trump in the 2018 midterms, a great deal of attention has been paid to special House elections in Georgia and Kansas. But for the first race that could really give us an idea of what to expect, let's take a trip down to the Old Dominion, my home Commonwealth of Virginia. Long a Republican stronghold, Virginia's become a swing state in recent years, voting for President Obama twice and Hillary Clinton once. And as such, their governor race this year is one to keep a close eye on. On the Republican side, the frontrunner and likely nominee is former RNC chair and Enron lobbyist Ed Gillespie. Gillespie ran for Senate in 2014 and came within 2 percentage points of victory. His closest challenger is Corey Stewart. He's the chair of the Prince William County Board of Supervisors, who's made a name for himself as an ardent foe of illegal immigration. Earlier this year, he did a Facebook Live segment in front of a jail which he called Where Illegals Belong. He was also the chair of Trump's Virginia campaign until he was let go for holding a rally in front of RNC headquarters in D.C., where he called RNC officials establishment pukes. In keeping with this image, he was ultimately blocked by Gillespie on Twitter after calling him Establishment Ed repeatedly and finally calling him a cuckservative. Nice guy. A centerpiece of his campaign is preserving Confederate monuments. Stewart, who hails from the heart of Dixie, by which I mean Duluth, Minnesota, has gone so far as to defend a recently removed statue in New Orleans that honored white supremacists who drove blacks out of the city government in the 1890s. Trailing by 27 points and losing 5 endorsements this week over his neo-Confederate posturing, Stewart's prospects in the June primary are not good. Virginia Democrats, on the other hand, hope to avoid a bloody primary, convincing Attorney General Mark Herring to run for re-election and seemingly setting up a coronation for Lieutenant Governor Ralph Northam. Northam has the backing of most of the state's Democratic establishment, including both senators and the governor. He's a low-key, traditional Virginia Democrat from the Eastern Shore. But in January, former Charlottesville Congressman Tom Perriello threw his hat in the ring. Perriello has been running a populist campaign focusing on fighting big utility companies in Virginia, combating the opioid crisis, and most significantly, opposing Donald Trump. While some see the primary as Hillary-Bernie Part 2, that oversimplifies the state of the race. While Perriello has been endorsed by Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and many liberal activist groups, he's also been endorsed by many former Obama allies, and his policies are not nearly as far to the left as Sanders were. He's jolted the race with his announcement, as a recent survey showed him tied with Northam, with about half of all voters undecided. So in a nutshell, here's what we can glean from this upcoming election. Should Northam and Gillespie win, it would be more of a return to normalcy for both parties. But if it's Perriello and Gillespie, it would signal that opposition to Trump could be the strategy for Democrats in the coming midterms. And if Perriello rises opposition all the way to the governor's mansion, it would signal that that strategy could be a winning one. Guys?
Thanks, Alex. One thing that I think is troubling, or people are concerned with within the state of Virginia, is the struggle between the establishmentarian Democrats and then the populist Democrats. And we see that not so much below the Mason-Dixon line. Now, how is that kind of affecting voters within the state, as it's flip-flopped several different times, but it's largely a part of the conservative heartland?
Well, I think that the Democratic primary in June is going to depend on a lot on what the electorate looks like. If the electorate looks like what we usually see in Democratic primaries, which is older, whiter, like you said, establishment Democrats, I think that Northam will probably be the nominee. But if it looks more like sort of the Obama coalition, if Perriello can rally these young voters, these minority voters, these wealthy or better off liberals in Northern Virginia, and if he can maybe grab a few of the rural populists who backed Donald Trump in the fall, I think he's got a real shot at the nomination in that case.
I think it's going to be an interesting dogfight, something the nation and obviously you'll be keeping an eye on.
Pleasure working with you for 3 years. Alex.
Thank you, Mike. You too.
For all of us at Talking Points, we thank you for your
Absolutely. Thank you, Alex.
Ahead, Venezuelan protests continue and President Nicolas Maduro responds. We'll be right back.
This is the story of a boy who didn't talk for a long time. The boy liked things to always be the same. Any changes would scare and upset him. The unknown was an unfriendly place. The boy was very sensitive to lights and sounds. So he built secret hiding places where they couldn't get in. The boy didn't like looking people in the eye. He wasn't trying to be mean, it just made him feel uncomfortable. Sometimes he would flap his arms again and again.
One day, I found out I have something called autism. My family got me help. Slowly, I found my voice and learned all the ways I could live with it better.
Early intervention can make a lifetime of difference. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org.
Hey, look, it's those guys. Are you good to drive?
I'm fine.
How many did you have?
I should be fine.
You should be.
Go and step out of the vehicle for me.
See ya, buddy. Good luck. So turns out, buzz driving and drunk driving, they're the same thing, and it costs around $10,000. So not worth it.
Back in 2014, a series of political demonstrations and protests began in Venezuela. Today, the insurrection continues violently. The country is suffering from inflation, corruption, and chronic shortages that have left citizens struggling to acquire basic necessities like bread. International correspondent Zina Saifi is here to tell us what these protests mean for President Nicolas Maduro. Zina, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So these protests have been going on for quite some time, but the root of it is some people are a little unsure about. So what kind of instigated these protests originally?
Basically, there are so many crises in Venezuela that are interconnected. A huge one, a key one, is the status of the economy. It's said that by the end of this year, the inflation is going to close at around 700%. Wow. But in addition to that, what really instigated it is when Venezuela's Supreme Court, aligned with the socialist president, Nicolas Maduro, ruled that they were going to take control over the Congress's legislative orders, which is led by the opposition party, the National Assembly. And that was kind of a move condemned as an attempt to instill a dictatorship.
Like you said, the critics are calling him a dictator. He's saying that the opposition is conspiring with foreign entities to destabilize the country. Where is the truth in these opposing statements?
It's really hard to find where the truth actually lies, because on Maduro's side, he is trying to follow in the footsteps of Hugo Chavez, who kind of gained popularity because he is from the working class. So he kind of targeted that group, whereas the other side are kind of engaging with the international community because of all the violence that has happened under Maduro's presidency. So it's really hard to kind of find the difference and who is right and who's wrong. But definitely the side that are voting for Maduro are saying that he used the oil richness in Venezuela to kind of fix the inequality, whereas the other side says that's kind of coming at the expense of the democracy.
Now, Maduro said that he wants to get out of this united sort of group of states. Now, what exactly does that mean if Maduro was to go ahead and make that decision? What would the implications be?
It's kind of hard to judge now, because Venezuela is the first state to actually withdraw since the signing of the charter in 1948. But moving forward for Maduro, he always responds to everything with a heavy hand, and now he seems to be lessening that stance, where he's saying he's now open to re-elections and even to changing the constitution to solve the crisis. He didn't really give a time frame, but he's open to more discussions now.
Certainly something the global community needs to be paying attention to. Thank you for bringing it to our attention, Zina.
Thank you.
After a quick break, Mike and I will discuss the stories we're looking forward to seeing over the summer. Stay with us.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for information on how to provide even better care for the person who wants to care of you.
One story that I'll be looking ahead to in the months to come is how two major elections in Europe will change the face of the continent and the EU. As France and Germany head to the polls at the beginning and end of this summer, I'll be looking to see not only the results, but the implications of the votes. With Eurosceptic candidates holding strong voices in both of the races, the results could fundamentally change the power struggle in mainland Europe. In light of the impending British exit from the European Union, coupled with strong nationalist sentiment in both of these races, the probability that another major exit by France is moderate to high. Such a shift would put Germany in a compromising situation moving forward, being the de facto leader of the Association of States, as well as continuing to foot the major part of the EU bill while potentially losing major stakeholders. The emergence of Macron, coupled with the steady rise of Le Pen, how will the French establishment respond? How will the French people respond? These are just some of the questions that I'll be looking forward to in the months ahead, and certainly something that the global community will be paying attention to in the weeks to come.
Following the final round of the French elections, I'm looking ahead to another European election this summer. Italy must hold their election by May 23rd of next year, but many are calling for early elections. The elections are preparing to be another battle on the European landscape between Eurosceptics and globalists. Right now, Partito Democratico, the center-left party currently in control of the government, has been overtaken in polling by Movimento 5 Stelle. Partito Democratico has been on the decline recently following their constitutional referendum loss and the resignation of Prime Minister Matteo Renzi. Movimento 5 Stelle is a populist, anti-establishment, Eurosceptic party that refuses to make alliances. Since Italy has so many parties, coalitions must be formed in order to control the government. Lega Nord and Forza Italia, the most popular parties behind Partito Democratico and Movimento 5 Stelle, are also Eurosceptic. If Movimento 5 Stelle wins, they will look to leave the EU, This is what to watch for, whether or not they will be able to form a coalition government and relive the wave of populism spreading throughout Europe. That's all we have for tonight and for the rest of this semester.
In the meantime, check us out on CitrusTV.com for all things Talking Points. You'll find episodes, segments, and blog posts on our personal page.
Thanks for joining us this semester.
And many thanks to all the seniors leaving us, especially Alex Amico, Zena Saifi, and Ray Merrick. Your work is greatly appreciated. Your contributions will be missed.
And Zena's been with us for 3 or 4 years now, at least as long as I've been here.
Yes.
Ray's moving on up to Plattsburgh to work in a news station there. He's been a great reporter for us. So thanks to all of you guys and all the work you did on Talking Points. Thanks to our executive producer, Tom Austin, who's done a great job this semester. And for Talking Points, I'm Mike Riccardi.
And I'm Josh Carney.